My name is Grace Harrison, 34 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. David and I were approaching our 9th anniversary when I discovered the ultimate betrayal. Not just from my husband, but from my own stepsister Megan. They moved her into our home behind my back, thinking I'd eventually surrender and leave. They underestimated me. If you're watching this from a place where family betrayal has touched your life, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming life's greatest challenges. I met David Walker when I was 25, fresh out of graduate school with my psychology degree clutched proudly in hand. He was 29, a promising architect with dreams as big as his smile. We connected instantly at a mutual friend's housewarming party, talking until dawn about everything from childhood memories to our ambitious career plans. David proposed after a year of dating during a weekend trip to Maine. We married in a small ceremony with just 40 guests, promising to build a life of honesty, respect, and unwavering support. For 8 years, we kept those promises. At least I thought we did. I loved my career as a psychology professor at the local university. Teaching bright young minds about human behavior was deeply fulfilling, especially since I never had a mentor who believed in me the way I believed in my students. David's architecture firm specialized in sustainable design, and his passion for creating environmentally conscious spaces matched my dedication to nurturing young minds. 3 years ago, we purchased our dream home in a quiet neighborhood just 15 minutes from campus. It was a charming craftsman with a wraparound porch and enough space for the family we planned to start. I contributed 70% of the down payment using inheritance money from my father, who had passed away 12 years earlier. David always said he felt guilty about my larger financial contribution, but I assured him marriage wasn't about keeping score. My relationship with my stepfamily had always been complicated. My father remarried Sandra when I was 14, bringing her daughter Megan, then 9, into our lives. Dad tried his best to blend our families, but there was always tension. When he died unexpectedly of a heart attack, the fragile bonds between me and my stepfamily began to unravel. Sandra was cordial but distant after Dad's passing. She quickly moved on with a new partner while I was left processing my grief alone. Megan, meanwhile, grew into a woman who seemed to resent my very existence. Throughout college and beyond, Megan developed a pattern of self-destructive behavior. She dropped out of 3 different universities, cycled through jobs every few months, and lived a chaotic lifestyle that often ended with late-night phone calls asking for money. I helped her financially more times than I can count, despite David's concerns that I was enabling her. The most painful betrayal before this current situation happened during my final year of graduate school. I discovered Megan had deliberately pursued my boyfriend at the time, Jared. She claimed it was innocent, but text messages proved otherwise. She had systematically tried to seduce him, telling him I was planning to break up with him anyway. When confronted, she laughed it off as just having some fun. Jared and I broke up, not because anything happened between them, but because the trust was irreparably damaged. Despite this history, I maintained a polite relationship with Megan for Sandra's sake. We exchanged birthday messages and saw each other at occasional family gatherings. I kept a healthy distance, but never completely cut ties. Before everything fell apart, David and I were in a wonderful place. We had been actively trying to conceive for about 6 months, excited about the prospect of becoming parents. We had just celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary with a weekend getaway to the same coastal town in Maine where he proposed. We were saving for a new car, planning to replace my aging sedan with something more family-friendly. Life felt full of promise and possibility. David's job required occasional travel, usually just for a few days at a time, to visit construction sites or meet with clients. I never worried when he was away. I trusted him completely. We video called every night he was gone, and he always brought me small souvenirs from his trips, a watercolour postcard from Portland, a handmade mug from Burlington, little tokens that said, "I was thinking of you even while we were apart." In retrospect, there were subtle shifts in our relationship that I rationalised away. David became more protective of his phone, often taking it with him, even for short trips to the bathroom. He worked later hours, citing a big project that needed extra attention. Our intimate life became less frequent, which I attributed to work stress and our focus on conception. I never imagined that the life we'd built together was about to implode. I never suspected that the two people who should have loved me most in the world were plotting behind my back. I never thought I would have to fight for what was rightfully mine, but that's exactly what happened. And in the process, I discovered just how strong I really am. The first hint that something was wrong came on an ordinary Tuesday in April. David had been acting strange for several weeks. Nothing dramatic, just small behavioural changes that nagged at my subconscious. He started checking his phone constantly, angling the screen away from me. When I asked casual questions about his day, his answers became vague and hurried. He'd developed the habit of taking work calls in the backyard rather than in his home office where I might overhear. Most concerning, he stopped talking about our future plans. Discussions about baby names or vacation destinations were met with distracted nods rather than enthusiastic participation. I initially chalked it up to work pressure. His firm had taken on a major commercial project, and I assumed he was feeling the weight of responsibility. But when I tried to be supportive by bringing dinner to his office one evening, he seemed almost annoyed by my presence. That wasn't the David I knew. Then came the day Megan showed up unexpectedly at my university office. I was grading papers between classes when she appeared in my doorway, looking uncharacteristically subdued. "Grace, I need to talk to you," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm in trouble." This wasn't unusual. Megan's life seemed to be a continuous cycle of self-created crises. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk, already mentally calculating how much money I could spare if this was another financial emergency. "I got evicted from my apartment," she explained, twisting a strand of hair nervously. "My roommate bailed on rent, and I couldn't cover it all. I have nowhere to go." "What about Mum?" I asked. Sandra and her husband owned a spacious home with a guest room. "They're travelling in Europe for 2 months. Besides, Jeff and I don't get along." Jeff was Sandra's husband of 3 years, a retired businessman with little patience for Megan's drama. "I need a loan for a new deposit," she continued, "just until I get back on my feet." I sighed. "Megan, I can't keep doing this. The last time I loaned you money for rent, you bought a plane ticket to Miami instead." "That was different. I was in a bad place then. I swear I'll pay you back this time." I stood firm. "I'm sorry, but no. I can help you look for affordable housing options or talk to someone at the Community Assistance Centre where I volunteer." Her face darkened. "Forget it. I thought since we're family you might actually care." She stood abruptly, then paused at the door. "How's David doing, still working late on that big project?" The question struck me as odd. "Yes, he is. Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "Just curious. We bumped into each other at Harper's Cafe last week. He mentioned it." That was strange. David hadn't mentioned seeing Megan, and Harper's was nowhere near his office or usual lunch spots. When I brought it up that evening, he became defensive. "It was just a quick coffee. She happened to be there when I was meeting a client." "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating you. I'm just surprised you didn't mention it." "Because it wasn't important." He changed the subject abruptly. "What's for dinner?" The next day, my colleague Alyssa stopped by my office. "I saw your husband at the Riverside Grill yesterday. That young woman he was with looked so much like you. Is she your sister?" My heart stuttered. What time was this? Around 1:30. They seemed pretty intense in conversation. David had told me he was meeting a contractor at the building site at that time. The Riverside Grill was an intimate restaurant. known for its romantic atmosphere, not a place for business meetings, and Megan and I looked nothing alike. She was petite with dark hair and olive skin that reflected her father's Italian heritage. I was taller with auburn hair and freckles from my Irish ancestors. That evening I casually mentioned Megan again, watching David's reaction closely. "I'm worried about Megan. She got evicted from her apartment." David nearly choked on his wine. "That's unfortunate," he said after recovering. "But it's not your problem, Grace. She's a grown woman." "I know. It's just sad that she doesn't have a support system." He became agitated. "You can't save everyone. Your sister needs to take responsibility for her own life." "Stepsister," I corrected, struck by his uncharacteristic harshness. David had always been compassionate about others' struggles. The final red flag came that weekend. We had planned a trip to a bed and breakfast in Vermont, a rare 2-day break from our busy schedules. 2 days before we were set to leave, David announced he had to cancel. The client meeting got moved up. "I have to be there in person. Can't someone else from the firm handle it?" "No, Grace. This is my project, my responsibility." His tone left no room for discussion. Later that night, I heard him on the phone in the bathroom speaking in hushed tones. I caught fragments of the conversation. "She doesn't suspect anything," and "just a little longer." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't yet piece together what it was. I only knew that the husband I trusted implicitly was keeping secrets, and somehow Megan was involved. I began to pay more attention. I noticed David changing passwords on his laptop and bank accounts. He started receiving packages and hiding them before I could see the contents. He made excuses to avoid date nights and family gatherings. My academic training made me systematic. I started keeping a journal of these inconsistencies, looking for patterns. Was he having a midlife crisis? Was there a financial problem he was hiding? Was he planning a surprise that required secrecy? The possibility of an affair crossed my mind, but I dismissed it. Despite the distance growing between us, I believed in our bond. I believed in David. I couldn't imagine he would betray our vows. I was wrong. The truth was far worse than a simple affair, and I was about to discover just how blind I'd been to the deception unfolding in my own home. On a Thursday in early May, my afternoon class was unexpectedly cancelled. When the guest speaker came down with food poisoning, I decided to use the free time to catch up on housework and perhaps prepare a special dinner to reconnect with David. We'd been like ships passing in the night lately, and I missed the easy companionship we once shared. I pulled into our driveway around 2:30 immediately, noticing an unfamiliar car parked in front of our house, a sleek black sedan with rental plates. Probably a neighbour's visitor, I thought. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual. Inside the house felt different somehow. There was a subtle floral perfume in the air that wasn't mine. A jacket I'd never seen hung on the coat rack. Women's boots size 6 or 7 were placed neatly by the door. My heart pounded as I moved through the house. In the kitchen, there were 2 empty wine glasses in the sink and takeout containers from an Italian restaurant we rarely ordered from. "Hello," I called out. No answer. Upstairs, the guest room door was closed. I hesitated before turning the knob, unsure what I would find. The room, normally pristine and ready for occasional visitors, had been transformed. Clothes spilled from an open suitcase on the bed. Makeup and hair products cluttered the dresser. Fashion magazines were stacked on the nightstand. Someone had moved in. On the bed was a note in David's handwriting. "Made up the room with fresh sheets. Use whatever you need. We'll talk to Grace together when she gets home. It's just temporary, I promise." My hands trembled as I read the words. Who was staying in our home? Why hadn't David discussed this with me? And why did he feel the need to present a united front with this mysterious guest? When telling me about it, I checked our bedroom next half, expecting to find evidence of an affair. The room was untouched, but when I went into our bathroom, I discovered women's toiletries in the shower, expensive shampoo and conditioner that I would never buy, a razor that wasn't mine, face wash formulated for oily skin. While I had always struggled with dryness, I sank onto the edge of the bathtub, trying to process what I was seeing. Someone was living in our house, using our space, and David had facilitated it all behind my back. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Come home now, we need to talk." No response. I considered leaving, going to a friend's house until I could confront David on neutral ground. But this was my home. I had paid for most of it. I wasn't going to be driven out by whatever scheme was unfolding. So I waited. I sat in the living room perfectly still, watching the minutes tick by on the grandfather clock that had belonged to my father. 3 hours passed. With each chime of the clock, my hurt crystallized into anger and my confusion sharpened into resolve. At 6:15, I heard a key in the lock. Laughter drifted in before the door opened. 2 voices, one David's, the other unmistakably female. "I still can't believe you got reservations there," the woman was saying. "It's impossible unless you know someone." "I have connections," David replied, his voice warm with an affectionate tone I hadn't heard directed at me in months. They stepped into the foyer, still unaware of my presence. David froze when he saw me sitting in the armchair, hands folded in my lap. Next to him, equally startled, stood Megan. "Grace," David recovered first. "You're home early." "Clearly," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Would one of you like to explain why my stepsister appears to have moved into our guest room without my knowledge?" They exchanged a look that confirmed this was no surprise visit. This had been planned. "Grace, I can explain," David began, moving toward me. I held up a hand to stop him. "I'm sure you can. I'm waiting. Megan needed a place to stay. She lost her apartment and I couldn't just leave her homeless. So you moved her into our home without discussing it with me first. Your wife. I knew you'd say no after what happened with the money last time," he said, as if that justified his deception. "Sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission." "This isn't about forgiveness, David. This is about respect. Basic respect for me and our marriage." Megan stepped forward, her expression a perfect mask of contrition. "Grace, I'm so sorry it happened this way. David insisted we tell you together, but we couldn't reach you today." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't pretend this was some misunderstanding. My class was cancelled 2 hours ago. You've had plenty of time to call since then." "We were out looking at job opportunities for Megan," David explained hastily. "Her phone died, and I left mine in the car." The excuses were flimsy, insulting in their transparency. I turned my attention to Megan. "How long have you been planning to move in?" She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't planned exactly. David and I ran into each other last week, and I mentioned my situation. He generously offered the guest room. It's just temporary, Grace. 1 or 2 months until I get back on my feet." 1 or 2 months, I repeated. "And you didn't think I deserved a conversation about someone living in our home for up to 60 days. "I was going to tell you," David insisted. "Tonight over dinner, I bought your favourite wine." How considerate. My sarcasm was thick enough to cut. "And why exactly couldn't you have told me before moving her in, before changing our home without my consent?" David's expression hardened slightly. "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. You and Megan have a complicated history. I thought if she was already settled in, you'd be more willing to give it a chance." "That's not your decision to make unilaterally in a marriage," I said. "This is my home too. More than half of it is legally mine." "Our home," David corrected. "And Megan is family. We have 3 bedrooms and only use 2. It's the right thing to do." I looked between them, noting how they stood together, a united front against me. Megan edged slightly closer to David, her body language proprietary in a way that sent warning signals through my brain. "Thank you so much for understanding, Grace," Megan said, stepping forward to hug me. Her embrace lasted too long, her cheek pressed against mine in a show of affection we'd never shared. I promise I'll stay out of your way. You won't even know I'm here. As she pulled back, she added, David and I already discussed the household rules. I know which spaces are private and which are shared. The casual way she referred to private conversations with my husband about our home made my skin crawl. Did you now? It's David's house too, Megan said, a hint of challenge in her voice. He has just as much right to invite family to stay as you do. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to correct her presumption. He said nothing, his silence a betrayal in itself. We'll discuss this later, I finally said, standing up. I need some air. Grace, don't leave, David called after me as I headed for the door. Let's talk about this calmly. I am calm, I replied. But I need space to process the fact that my husband and stepsister have been making decisions about my home behind my back. I'll be back in an hour. I drove aimlessly, trying to understand what was happening. It wasn't just the unwanted house guest that disturbed me. It was the secretive nature of it all, the way they seemed so comfortable, conspiring together, the way David had prioritized Megan's needs over my feelings. Something deeper was wrong here, and I was determined to find out what it was. The next 2 weeks were the most stressful of my life. Having Megan in our home created a tension that never dissipated. She claimed to be job hunting during the days, but I rarely saw evidence of actual interviews or applications. Instead, she spent hours on our couch watching television or scrolling through social media. Despite her promise to stay out of my way, Megan managed to insert herself into every aspect of our daily life. She used my expensive face creams without asking. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets to make more sense. She even wore my clothes, claiming she thought they were items I no longer wanted. This blouse was hanging on the back of the closet door, she said, when I confronted her about wearing my silk top. I thought it was up for grabs. The back of my closet door, I emphasized, in my bedroom. I was just looking for an iron, she explained, her expression innocent. The blouse caught my eye. It looks better on me anyway with my colouring. David, who would have once backed me up without question, now played mediator. It's just a shirt, Grace. Let it go. Just a shirt. Just kitchen cabinets. Just face cream. But it wasn't just about the items themselves, it was about boundaries being trampled and my husband allowing it to happen. I began to notice hushed conversations between David and Megan that would stop abruptly when I entered a room. They developed inside jokes I wasn't privy to. They watched shows together in the evening while I graded papers in my office, excluded from their cozy dynamic. One morning, I came downstairs to find them sharing breakfast, laughing over some private joke. My usual seat at the table was occupied by Megan's laptop and papers. There was no place set for me. Sorry we didn't know when you'd be up, David explained, not sounding sorry at all. There's more coffee in the pot. I have my own mug, Megan added, holding up my favourite ceramic cup, the one David had given me for our 5th anniversary. When I expressed my frustration to David later, he accused me of being territorial and unwelcoming. She's trying Grace. Why can't you meet her halfway? Because she's not meeting me anywhere, I replied. She's taking over our space, using my things without permission, and you're letting it happen. You're being dramatic. She's going through a rough patch and we should support her. Support doesn't mean surrendering our privacy and boundaries. David sighed heavily. I thought you'd be more compassionate given your profession. Isn't psychology about understanding human struggles? Don't use my career to manipulate me, I said sharply. This isn't about compassion. It's about respect, which both of you seem to lack. The situation deteriorated further when Megan accidentally broke a crystal vase that had belonged to my grandmother. Instead of apologizing, she suggested it was my fault for keeping something so valuable out where it could be knocked over. David defended her. It was an accident, Grace. You're overreacting because you're still upset about the living arrangement. I felt like I was living with two people united against me in my own home. The worst part was that David no longer seemed like my husband and partner. He had become Megan's ally, her defender, her friend, in a way that excluded me entirely. One evening, I came home to find my office had been reorganized. My carefully arranged research papers were stacked haphazardly. Books had been removed from shelves and placed in boxes. Megan thought you might want to convert this space into a proper guest room, David explained when I demanded to know what happened. Since she's staying longer than expected. Longer, we agreed on 2 months maximum. David wouldn't meet my eyes. Her job search is taking longer than anticipated. It might be 3 or 4 months, maybe through the end of the year. The end of the year? That's 7 months away. She's family, Grace. We can't put her on the street. I was speechless with anger and hurt. 7 months of this tension, 7 months of being a stranger in my own home. It was unthinkable. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I went downstairs for some water. As I approached the kitchen, I heard low voices. David and Megan were sitting at the island heads, close together, speaking intently. I stopped just out of sight, listening. "We need to speed things up," Megan was saying. "She's becoming more suspicious every day." "I know, but we have to be careful," David replied. "One wrong move, and everything falls apart. The longer it takes, the more likely she'll figure it out. We need to push harder, make her uncomfortable enough to leave on her own. And if she doesn't, then we move to plan B, but I'd rather not. It gets messier that way." I retreated silently to our bedroom, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about Megan needing a place to stay. They were actively trying to drive me out of my own home. But why? The next day, I discovered Megan photographing our financial documents in David's home office. When confronted, she claimed she was helping David organize his paperwork and needed digital copies for a filing system she was creating. I didn't believe her for a second. Later, I checked David's desk drawer where we kept important papers. Several were missing, including the deed to our house and documents related to my inheritance. My suspicions now fully aroused. I began my own covert investigation. I checked our joint bank accounts and discovered several large withdrawals I couldn't account for. I found credit card statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels on days David claimed to be working late. And then came the final straw. Megan started inviting friends over without asking, hosting small gatherings in our living room while I was at work. I came home one afternoon to find 3 strangers lounging on my furniture, drinking my wine with Megan playing hostess as if she owned the place. "Grace, come, meet my friends," she called out, completely unapologetic. "We're celebrating my new job interview." I smiled tightly and excused myself, heading straight upstairs to call David. His response confirmed my worst fears about how far our relationship had deteriorated. "They're just friends, Grace. Stop trying to isolate her. If you made more of an effort to get to know her, maybe you'd be included in these gatherings." Desperate for an ally, I reached out to Sandra, hoping my stepmother might intervene. We met for coffee at a cafe far from my neighborhood to ensure privacy. "I'm concerned about Megan," I began carefully. "She's moved into our home without my consent, and things are becoming increasingly uncomfortable." Sandra sipped her latte, her expression neutral. "I heard she was staying with you. That's very generous considering your past conflicts." "It wasn't my choice. David invited her without telling me." "Well, David has always been kind-hearted. I'm not surprised he wanted to help her." I tried again. "Sandra, there's something strange going on. They're secretive together. They've been looking at our financial documents. I think they might be planning something." Sandra set down her cup with a sigh. "Grace, don't you think you're being paranoid? Megan has always struggled, but she's not malicious. What about when she tried to seduce Jared? Was that not malicious? That was years ago. She was young and foolish." Sandra reached across the table to pat my hand. "Megan has always been jealous of you, you know. You had your father's love and attention. You got the good education, the stable career, the perfect husband. Maybe this is an opportunity for you two to finally become real sisters. I pulled my hand away. She's deliberately trying to come between me and David. Or perhaps you're creating problems because you don't want to share your good fortune. Sandra's tone hardened slightly. Megan is my daughter Grace. She deserves happiness too. At the expense of mine. Don't be dramatic. Sharing your home temporarily isn't a great sacrifice. I left the cafe, knowing I would get no help from that quarter. Sandra had always favoured Megan making excuses for her behaviour while holding me to a higher standard. Nothing had changed. I was on my own, but I wasn't without resources. I had my intelligence, my determination, and a growing sense that I needed to fight for what was mine. If David and Megan were conspiring against me, they were about to discover I wasn't as easily manipulated as they thought. It was time to uncover exactly what they were planning, and once I knew the truth, I would be ready to protect myself. After my disappointing meeting with Sandra, I realised I needed professional help to understand what was happening in my home. On the recommendation of a trusted colleague, I hired Jack Bennett, a private investigator with experience in domestic cases. I need to know what my husband and stepsister are doing behind my back, I explained during our initial consultation. Something isn't right, but I can't put all the pieces together. Jack was in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a matter-of-fact manner that I found reassuring. I've been doing this for 25 years, Dr. Harrison. People aren't as clever as they think they are. If there's something to find, we'll find it. For the next 2 weeks, Jack monitored David's movements, tracked Megan's activities outside our home, and gathered information about their financial transactions. I created opportunities for him to work by volunteering for evening lectures and weekend workshops at the university, ensuring the house would be empty for extended periods. When we met again, Jack's expression told me he had discovered something significant. He placed a folder on the table between us. "I'll start with the relationship," he said without preamble. "Your husband and stepsister have been involved romantically for approximately 6 months. Though I had suspected something along these lines, hearing it confirmed felt like a physical blow. 6 months, are you certain?" "Yes. They first connected last November at a charity event your husband's firm sponsored. Ms. Peters was working as a hostess there. They exchanged numbers and communication began shortly after. He showed me phone records documenting hundreds of text messages and calls between them. That's when David started working late more often," I murmured. Jack nodded. Those late nights were spent in Ms. Peters's apartment or in hotels outside the city. He showed me credit card receipts, hotel check-in records, and surveillance photos of David and Megan entering a hotel together. "The affair is only part of the picture," Jack continued. "Based on my investigation, they have a specific financial motivation for their current arrangement." "What do you mean? Your husband's firm is in serious financial trouble. They lost 2 major clients last year, and there's evidence he's been misappropriating company funds to cover personal debts." Jack showed me bank statements indicating David had accumulated nearly $100,000 in gambling debts over the past 2 years. "Gambling David hates gambling," I said, confused. "People change or they hide parts of themselves. Your husband has been frequenting an underground poker game for at least 18 months. His losses are substantial." This was a side of David I never could have imagined. Responsible, cautious David with a secret gambling addiction. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. "What does this have to do with Megan?" Jack's expression hardened. "Ms. Peters has her own history of financial impropriety. She was investigated for credit card fraud 3 years ago, but avoided charges when the victim declined to press the case. The victim, an elderly man she was dating at the time. According to my sources, she convinced him it was all a misunderstanding." The picture was becoming clearer, but I still didn't understand their endgame. "Why move her into our house? What are they planning? Based on documents I've intercepted and conversations I've recorded, they're attempting to force you out so they can sell the house and use the proceeds to clear Mr. Walker's debts. They've already taken steps in that direction. Jack showed me paperwork indicating David had secretly refinanced our home, forging my signature on the documents. He had withdrawn over $60,000 in equity without my knowledge or consent. Is that even legal? I asked, stunned by the betrayal. No, it's mortgage fraud. But lenders don't always verify signatures as thoroughly as they should. The bank believed both homeowners had consented. Jack had more. Megan and David had opened credit cards in my name, running up significant debt. They had transferred money from my personal savings into accounts I couldn't access. They had even begun selling some of my more valuable possessions, including jewelry inherited from my grandmother. Their plan seems to be to make living conditions so unbearable that you leave voluntarily, Jack explained. Once you're gone, they believe they can pressure you into a divorce settlement where you relinquish your claim to the house in exchange for a quick resolution. And if I don't leave voluntarily, there's evidence they've discussed more aggressive measures. Nothing explicitly illegal in the conversations I've recorded, but concerning nonetheless. References to making you appear unstable or unfit. I felt sick. My husband of 8 years and a woman who shared my father's love were conspiring not just to betray me emotionally, but to destroy me financially and potentially damage my reputation and career. What should I do? I asked, my voice barely audible. You need legal counsel immediately, Jack advised. I can recommend several attorneys who specialize in cases like this, and you should secure your remaining assets right away. I left our meeting with a plan forming in my mind. If David and Megan thought I was an easy target, they had severely underestimated me. I wouldn't be driven from my home or bullied into surrendering what was rightfully mine. I would fight back methodically and strategically. My first call was to Jasmine Taylor, a family law attorney known for handling complex divorce cases involving financial deception. She listened to my story without interruption, taking detailed notes. Dr. Harrison, what your husband has done constitutes both financial infidelity and actual fraud, she said when I finished. The forged signatures alone are a criminal offence. We have multiple legal avenues to pursue here. What do you recommend? Don't confront them yet. We need to gather more evidence and protect your assets first. Can you access your important documents without alerting them? Some of them are missing, but I have copies in a safe deposit box David doesn't know about. My father had taught me the importance of keeping duplicate records, a lesson I'd followed even during my trusting marriage. Good. We need to move quickly to freeze joint accounts and credit lines before more damage is done. And I suggest you start documenting every interaction with both of them. Record conversations, if legal, in your state. Keep a detailed journal. We want to establish a pattern of behaviour. After my meeting with Jasmine, I reached out to Michael Delgado, a police officer who occasionally guest lectured in my forensic psychology class. Without revealing all the details, I asked for his advice on handling potential identity theft and mortgage fraud. These are serious crimes, Grace, he said, concern evident in his voice. If what you're telling me is accurate, your husband could face criminal charges. I understand. I just want to know my options. Michael outlined the legal process for reporting such crimes and recommended additional security measures I should take immediately. He also offered to help review any evidence I gathered from a law enforcement perspective. Armed with professional advice, I began preparing for battle. I opened new bank accounts at an institution where David and I had no previous relationship. I moved my direct deposit from the university to this new account. I placed a freeze on my credit to prevent additional accounts from being opened in my name. I installed small, discrete cameras in several locations throughout the house, ensuring they were well hidden, but positioned to capture key areas. I backed up important computer files and emails to secure cloud storage David couldn't access. I also began building a support network, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, and strengthening relationships with trusted colleagues. I would need emotional support for what was coming. Throughout this preparation phase, I maintained a calm facade at home. I pretended to accept Megan's permanent presence, even agreeing to convert my office into a more comfortable space for her. I showed less resistance to their increasingly blatant takeover of the house. "I'm glad you're finally coming around," David said one evening, clearly pleased with what he perceived as my surrender. "I think we can all be comfortable here together." "I'm trying to make the best of the situation," I replied, my tone neutral. Inside, I was counting down the days until I could reclaim my life and my home. What David and Megan didn't realize was that while they thought they were springing a trap, they were actually walking into one. And when it closed around them, they would discover just how formidable an opponent I could be. For 3 weeks, I gathered evidence while appearing to accept my new reality. I maintained a detailed journal of every suspicious conversation, every unexplained absence, every unauthorized use of my possessions or finances. The hidden cameras captured numerous incriminating interactions between David and Megan when they thought I wasn't around. "She's giving up," Megan said on one recording, lounging on our couch with her legs draped across David's lap. "I told you she'd eventually accept the situation." "It's still too soon," David replied absently, stroking her calf. "Grace isn't stupid. She might be planning something." What could she possibly do? "We've already transferred most of the liquid assets. The house is practically ours. We need to be careful until the divorce is finalized. One wrong move and we could lose everything." Their casual discussion of my eventual defeat fueled my determination. With Jasmine's help, I compiled documentation of all the financial fraud David had committed: the forged signatures, the unauthorized credit accounts, the stolen identity, the misappropriated inheritance funds. I also worked with Jack Bennett to document the affair, gathering irrefutable evidence of their betrayal: photographs, video recordings, text message transcripts, hotel receipts. Their deception was laid bare in meticulous detail. Through Michael's law enforcement connections, I learned that Megan had an outstanding warrant in a neighbouring state for check fraud charges she'd skipped bail on 2 years earlier. Another piece to add to my arsenal. During this time, I discovered something that shocked even me. David had contacted the dean of my department, suggesting concerns about my mental stability. He had insinuated that work pressure was causing erratic behaviour at home, laying groundwork to potentially undermine my professional credibility if I fought back. Fortunately, Dean Richardson had known me for years and found the contact suspicious enough to mention it during our next meeting. "Your husband seemed unusually interested in our faculty mental health policies," she noted. "Is everything all right, Grace?" "It will be," I assured her, then explained enough of the situation to ensure the university wouldn't be manipulated into David's scheme. Richardson promised her support, another ally in my corner. With my evidence compiled and my legal strategy in place, I was ready to execute my plan. The opportunity came when David announced he and Megan would be hosting a small dinner party at our home. "Just a few friends from work," he explained, "to celebrate Megan's new job." The supposed new job was fiction. Through my surveillance, I knew Megan spent her days shopping with my credit cards or meeting with David not working. But I nodded agreeably. "That sounds nice. When is it?" "Saturday evening. You'll be at that faculty retreat, right?" This was perfect. They thought I would be away at a university function, giving them freedom to use our home as they pleased. "Yes, I'll be gone all weekend." "Perfect." The relief in his voice was palpable. "We won't disturb your things." On Saturday morning, I made a show of packing for my retreat, loading a suitcase into my car and saying a pleasant goodbye. "Have fun with your friends," I called out cheerfully. "See you Sunday night." Instead of driving to the university lodge, I checked into a hotel 20 minutes from our house. I spent the day reviewing my strategy with Jasmine and coordinating with Michael, who had agreed to be available if the situation escalated. At 7:30 that evening, I drove back to our neighborhood parking a block away. Through the home security app on my phone, I could see the gathering was in full swing. 8 people were in our living room, drinking and laughing. David had his arm around Megan's waist, their affection on full display now that they thought I was safely away. I texted Jack, who confirmed he was in position with his camera. Then I called Michael to ensure he was ready if needed. Finally, I contacted our neighbours, the Wilsons, with whom I'd shared enough of the situation to gain their support. At 8:15, I approached my own front door and used my key to enter. The sudden silence as the party guests noticed me was deeply satisfying. "Grace," David's face drained of colour. "What are you doing here? I thought you were at the retreat." "Change of plans," I said, calmly setting down my purse on the entryway table. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Megan recovered first, pasting on a smile. "Of course not, join us. We're celebrating my new position at Anderson Marketing." "That's interesting," I replied. "Considering Anderson, Marketing closed their local office last month. I read about it in the business section." Her smile faltered. One of the guests, a woman I'd never met, looked between us with sudden interest. Perhaps I misunderstood the company name. Megan backpedaled. "It's all been such a whirlwind." "I'm sure it has." I turned to address the room. "I apologise for interrupting your evening, but I'm afraid I need to have a private conversation with my husband and stepsister. It's a family matter." The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. A man in a blue blazer stood up. "Maybe we should go, David. We can do this another time." No, David insisted, his forced smile painful to watch. "Grace is just confused. The retreat must have ended early. Everything's fine." I maintained my composure. "I assure you I'm not confused at all. But this evening is about to become extremely uncomfortable for everyone if you stay." One by one, the guests made their excuses and departed, despite David's increasingly desperate attempts to keep them there. Within 15 minutes, only the 3 of us remained. "What the hell was that?" David demanded, once the door closed behind the last guest. "You humiliated me in front of my colleagues." "I think we're well past concerns about humiliation, don't you?" I moved to the centre of the living room. "Let's talk about what's really been happening in this house." Megan stepped closer to David, their unified front reforming instantly. "Nothing is happening except you overreacting to a simple dinner party. A dinner party in my home, hosted by my husband and his mistress. That seems significant." David's expression hardened. "You're being ridiculous. Megan is family. Family doesn't usually share hotel rooms in Rochester when one of them is supposed to be at a building site in Syracuse." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photograph Jack had taken of them entering a hotel together. "You're spying on me." David's outrage was laughable given the circumstances. "Let's call it due diligence. The same way you've been keeping track of my finances, my schedule, and apparently my mental health status, according to the university." Their shocked expressions confirmed I had caught them off guard. I pressed on, laying out what I knew: the affair, the financial fraud, the identity theft, the forged documents, the systematic campaign to drive me from my own home. "You've been busy," I concluded. "Unfortunately for you, I haven't been as oblivious as you assumed." "These are serious accusations," David said, his lawyer voice emerging. "You have no proof of any of this." "Actually, I have extensive proof." I gestured around the room. "Including recordings from cameras that have been documenting your conversations for weeks. Would you like me to play the one where you discuss how to pressure me into giving up my claim to the house, or perhaps the one where Megan suggests selling my grandmother's jewellery because she'll never notice it's gone?" Their faces showed the first real signs of fear. "Good." "What do you want?" Megan asked, her bravado cracking. "I want you out of my house. Tonight. And I want my husband to explain why he committed mortgage fraud, identity theft. and conspiracy to defraud. David attempted to regain control of the situation. Grace, you're overreacting. We can talk about this rationally. We're well past rational discussion. You forged my signature on legal documents. You stole my identity to open credit accounts. You conspired with my stepsister to deprive me of my home and financial security. These are crimes, David, felonies. You'd never press charges, he scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Wouldn't I? Shall we test that theory? I moved toward the phone. I have a police officer on standby who would be very interested in the evidence I've gathered. Before either could respond, there was a pounding on the front door, followed by shouting. Our next-door neighbour, Thomas Wilson, was creating a pre-arranged disturbance about noise levels. Right on schedule, David went to deal with the situation, leaving Megan and me alone. She dropped the innocent act immediately. You think you're so clever, she hissed. You've always thought you were better than me, the perfect daughter, the successful professor, the loving wife. You have no idea what David really thinks of you. I know exactly what he thinks. I've heard every conversation you've had in this house for weeks. Your contempt, your plans, your pathetic justifications for stealing what isn't yours. Her face contorted with anger. You didn't deserve any of this not Dad's attention, not the inheritance, not this house, not David. And you think you do, the perpetual victim who refuses to take responsibility for her own life, who tries to steal from family rather than build something for herself. She lunged toward me suddenly, her hand raised to strike. I stepped back, maintaining my distance. Careful, Megan. Assault charges would complicate your situation even further. Before she could respond, flashing lights appeared through the windows. The police had arrived in response to the noise complaint. Perfect timing. When David returned from the door, his face was ashen. The police are outside. The neighbours called about a disturbance. How unfortunate, I said calmly. I wonder what they'd find if they came inside identity theft evidence, fraudulent mortgage documents, a woman with an outstanding warrant. Megan's head snapped up at the last item. What are you talking about? Your check fraud charges in Pennsylvania. Did you think they just disappeared because you crossed state lines? David looked at Megan with new uncertainty. You said that was resolved. It is. She's lying. Would you like to explain that to the officers outside? I'm sure they'd be happy to run your identification. The situation was reaching its climax. Through the window, I could see Michael approaching the house in uniform. He wasn't officially on duty, but David and Megan wouldn't know that. What do you want from us? David asked, defeat creeping into his voice. I've already told you, Megan leaves immediately. You have until tomorrow to remove your essential belongings. My attorney will contact you regarding divorce proceedings. The evidence of your criminal activities will remain secured with trusted third parties to be used if necessary. You're throwing me out of my own house? David's indignation was remarkable given the circumstances. Your house, the house you secretly refinanced, the house you planned to sell out from under me, the house I paid 70% of the down payment for, that house. The doorbell rang. Michael's timing was impeccable. That would be my friend from the police department, I said. Your choice, David, a dignified exit or a very public scandal. Which will it be? The fight went out of them both. Megan began gathering her belongings, while David stood in stunned silence, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. You've been planning this, he said quietly. I learned from the best. I moved to open the door. You taught me how important it is to plan ahead. Within an hour, Megan was gone, driven away in a taxi with her hastily packed suitcase. David agreed to leave the following morning, taking only personal items until the legal division of property was settled. As the front door closed behind Michael, who had stayed to ensure a peaceful resolution, I stood alone in my reclaimed space. The house felt different already, cleaner, lighter, mine again. the battle wasn't over. There would be legal proceedings, financial untangling, emotional aftermath to process, but I had won the first decisive victory. I had protected what was mine. I had refused to be a victim, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength within myself I never knew existed. 1 year after that fateful Saturday night, I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. The same porch where David had once proposed marriage, the same swing where we had planned our future together. But now, both the house and my life were transformed. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier. Despite David's initial threats and denials, the evidence I'd gathered proved overwhelming. When faced with the possibility of criminal charges for mortgage fraud and identity theft, he agreed to a settlement that allowed me to keep the house and most of our joint assets. David received a suspended sentence and 3 years probation for the financial crimes. His architecture firm, already struggling, collapsed completely when his misappropriation of client funds came to light. Last I heard, he had moved to Arizona to work for a former colleague's small design studio, his professional reputation in tatters. Megan's fate had been less severe, but equally fitting. She accepted a plea deal for the outstanding fraud charges in Pennsylvania, resulting in community service and mandatory financial counseling. Sandra finally stopped enabling her behavior, insisting Megan seek therapy and legitimate employment instead of looking for shortcuts. She now worked as an administrative assistant in a dental office 3 states away. The most surprising development had been Sandra's eventual apology. After initially blaming me for destroying her daughter's life, she came to recognize the pattern of behavior she had overlooked for years. "I failed both of you," she admitted during a difficult conversation over coffee. "I protected Megan from consequences she needed to face, and I held you to impossible standards because you reminded me of your father." Our relationship remained complicated, but there was a new honesty between us that offered hope for genuine connection in the future. The months following the confrontation had been among the most challenging of my life. Despite my outward victory, I struggled privately with the profound betrayal by 2 people who should have loved me. There were nights I woke up gasping for breath, gripped by anxiety and doubt. Days when the simplest tasks seemed insurmountable. Moments when I questioned every relationship I'd ever had, wondering if I was fundamentally unlovable. But I refused to surrender to despair. I sought help through therapy, working with a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma. I joined a support group for survivors of emotional and financial abuse, finding strength in shared experiences and recovery strategies. I leaned on the friendships I'd nurtured during my marriage and cultivated new ones. Jasmine, my attorney, became a close friend and weekend hiking companion. Michael, whose presence that night had been so crucial, evolved from a professional acquaintance to something more. Our relationship was still new, still tentative, but built on a foundation of mutual respect and honesty that felt revolutionary after years of hidden deception. Perhaps the most healing aspect of my recovery was finding purpose in helping others. I developed a seminar series on financial literacy and relationship boundaries, drawing on my professional background and personal experience. I volunteered at a women's shelter, offering support to those rebuilding their lives after domestic trauma. I established a small scholarship fund at the university for students who had survived family betrayal. Through giving back, I reclaimed my sense of agency and worth. Each person I helped reinforced my belief that even the most painful experiences could be transformed into sources of wisdom and compassion. The house itself underwent a transformation parallel to my own. I renovated spaces that held painful memories, creating a home that reflected my tastes and needs alone. The guest room that had been Megan's temporary domain became a sunny yoga studio where I practiced mindfulness each morning. David's office was converted to a reading nook filled with books I'd always wanted to explore but never found time for. I planted a garden in the backyard, discovering unexpected joy in nurturing living things from seed to bloom. There was something profoundly healing about coaxing beauty from bare earth, about witnessing the resilience of plants that thrived despite harsh conditions. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that trust must be balanced with discernment, that loving someone doesn't mean surrendering your autonomy or security, that family bonds can be both our greatest strength and our deepest vulnerability. Most importantly, I had learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's healthy. And forgiveness doesn't mean allowing harmful people back into your life. It means releasing the anger that binds you to them, freeing yourself to move forward. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear. There would be more challenges, more growth, more moments of doubt. But I faced the future with a hard-won confidence. I had weathered the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger, wiser, more authentically myself. The house that was meant to be my prison had become the site of my liberation. The people who had tried to diminish me had instead revealed my power. The plot designed to break me had ultimately been the catalyst for my transformation. Sometimes I wondered if David and Megan realized the irony. In their attempt to push me into the gutter, they had instead cleared the way for me to claim the life I truly deserved, a life defined not by what others thought I should be, but by who I chose to become. As darkness settled around me and stars began to appear in the velvet sky, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever came next, I was ready, not because I had all the answers or guarantees of happiness, but because I finally understood my own worth, and that I realized was the greatest victory of all. If you've experienced betrayal from those closest to you, I hope my story offers some comfort and courage. The journey through such pain is never easy, but it can lead to unexpected strength and wisdom. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a significant betrayal? What helped you find your way forward? Please share in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if my story resonated with you. Together, we can turn our painful experiences into sources of healing for others. Thank you for listening to my journey.